Listen, the other thing that I was bemused by, and that is the only word that I could describe, was a prominence given to a left wing, very left wing, columnist who writes for Stuff, which I think is either the most viewed or the second most viewed news platform in New Zealand. And they employ a columnist by the name of Verity Johnson, who I think mostly earns her living by taking off her clothes. I'm not being nasty here, but I think she's a burlesque dancer, and is rather large one, I have to say, who is photographed often in odd poses with very little clothing on. Gosh, well, she might fit into those same some of those Ray Chung parties. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. What if she does in her private life? Except she does it actually commercially, as I understand. But she's also, so when they describe her as a business owner, I think it's a burlesque type thing. And listen, I don't get burlesque. I'll be the first person to admit it. I think it's a lovely idea, but it's just that the same people that do burlesque also seem to me to play roller hockey. You know what I mean, Josh? They seem to have that sort of same sort of physique, which is slightly too large for the clothes they're wearing. I don't mean to
Yeah.
be nasty about this, but I've always understood burlesque to be a sort of enticing, almost provocative, sensual art that titillates. That's a very good word to describe it. That titillates viewers and observers, and is meant to. That's the nature of burlesque. But it always seems that they've got always purchased clothing that never quite seems to fit them. And it's not exactly the most brilliant example of the female form that I've ever seen, but then I'm not putting myself out commercially and asking for it to be so. But there you are, Verity Johnson is. Doesn't matter. She's also an Auckland-based writer. She's not a very good one, and I think I can make that comparative judgment just on the base she writes articles and the logic she uses and the way in which she puts words together. It's not exactly what I call writing. I think it's a jamming of words and I hope that everything turns out. It's a bit like all those monkeys, that if you left them in a room with a typewriter long enough, they come up with complete works of Shakespeare. Well, I think I've found one of the monkeys. Anyhow, Verity Johnson wrote last Friday, I think, published by Stuff, a suggestion, and this is in response to, again, a cause celeb of the last couple of weeks, probably more of a cause celeb than the Ray Chung email at the end of the day, which was the letter that had been written by Sir Ian Taylor, is it? The chap from Dunedin who does all the graphics for the America's Cup, that one, in which he'd questioned the legacy of our late and lamented ex-Prime Minister, Dame Jacinda Ardern. The Knight questioning the Dame, there you go. And the reaction that had come to that. And the suggestion in Verity Johnson, in her defence of suggesting that the letter writer Taylor had got it all out of proportion, he was wrong, was that somehow he'd missed the obvious, had all of this criticism of Dame Jacinda Ardern, that she was the best example that she could find of being New Zealand's Winston Churchill. Now that was the claim. And it was put in headlines, Jacinda Ardern is New Zealand's Winston Churchill. And she made a whole series of odd, strange, historically irrelevant and bizarre connections and suggested that, well, just because there were a couple of things that happened to Jacinda Ardern and also to Winston Churchill, it was so obvious. But she also finished her article not only by saying that the similarities were stunning, it's incredible that Jacinda Ardern and Winston Churchill just, their legacy, what they went through, the way in which they were viewed by the population was exactly the same, which is why she made the assertion that Jacinda Ardern was New Zealand's Winston Churchill. But she also suggested, just like Winston Churchill, New Zealand would somehow come to its senses, just like the United Kingdom, with Winston Churchill, and realise that after they'd got rid of Jacinda Ardern, that just like they did in the mid-1950s, they would re-elect Jacinda Ardern at some time, as they had done Winston Churchill. some 6 or 7 years after he'd been got rid of, or in this case she'd been got rid of, as we came to our senses and realised what a great leader she had been. Like Churchill, says Verity Johnson, Jacinda Ardern is a great leader, but although she brings up both painful memories, creating both adoration and loathing. But the point is that, like New Zealand, she goes, Ardern, just like Churchill, became a victim of a party that couldn't deliver change. It's not her personal fault, she wrote. It was the party's fault en masse. But you don't fall in love with the party, you fall in love with the person, and middle New Zealand fell for Ardern, not Labour. Churchill was re-elected 6 years later, and if the strength of hatred pouring out for her over the past few weeks is anything to go by, I reckon we'd re-elect Ardern again too. After all, hate is just frustrated love, and we always want to give love another chance. Now, I've never seen a columnist in this country so clearly express a need for psychiatric attention, but Verity Johnson clearly has with that suggestion. But it's also, though she is redundant and perhaps representative of the left in this country, who honestly believe that COVID was World War II, COVID was being bombed by the Nazis, COVID was being involved in a world war, COVID was an existential threat to the country, and that COVID and its response by the government was a battle against an evil force that needed to be resisted, and only the individual, in this particular case Jacinda Ardern, could possibly have led New Zealand during these wartime conditions against a country much better equipped and against an existential threat to our nation. It's that sort of surreality, can I just say, and you might understand that she's a fiction writer, Verity Johnson, because she certainly lives in that world, but it's just that sort of surreality that still is such a strong part of the left in this country that I don't think any help, bar large quantities of industrial pharmaceuticals, will make any difference at all. And you can't talk to these people. You can't reason with them. You can't even get them to show a degree of perspective in 2025. Ah, well. But stuff still lovingly perpetrate and promote their stuff to the rest of us, if it's an unbidden truth that somehow we're just not bright enough to grasp. Those are my thoughts. What are yours?